All right, here we go looking at section 11.2, which happens to be dealing with areas inside of our circle um, and also areas of a circle. The part that we call area that's inside of a circle is what we call a sector. And so let's take a look and start with our vocabulary terms. The first one right here is population density. And I typed out right here the number of people living within a given area. And that area could be uh, as a state, it could be a county, it could be the city, it could be like the west coast of our country, just whatever it may be, that would be the population density. We try to find how many people are living within a certain area. Our next term right here, sector of a circle. You can see I drew a circle, and within this circle, I have two rays. And if I highlight this right here, that would be considered the sector. And so what I could find after today, using a particular equation, is to find what is the area of that piece of the circle, which is what we consider the sector. All right. To find the area of a circle, you have this equation. It is pi r squared, or area is equal to pi r squared. That one right there you should have memorized already. It's used quite often, even in the PSATs and the SATs, so it's good to know. All right, there is only one equation we use for area of a circle, and that is it right there, pi r squared. Let's go ahead and move to the next equation. And our next equation right here, and topic is finding the area of a sector. So in order to find the area of a sector, we have this ratio, we have this proportion that we use, and it's the area of sector, whatever we're looking for. This one in our diagram, it happens to be uh, sector ABP, and then we divide that by pi r squared. So similar to finding the arc length of something, we have in our equation, on the left side of our proportion, this will be dealing with measurement, okay? Measurement specifically being area. Over here on the right-hand side, once again, we're going to be dealing with degrees. So you don't get confused, well, what do they mean by the area of sector APB? And what is the measure of arc AB? Well, when they talk about the measure of arc AB, you have to know what the central angle is of that um, of the angle, central angle there, and that'll help us figure out what is the measurement of arc AB. So once again, we take the measurement of sector APB, divide that by pi r squared, and then we set that equal to the measure of the arc, which will be in degrees, divided by 360. Now they do show you the second equation down below, and what they end up doing was if you want to specifically find the area of sector APB, then you multiply both sides by pi r squared to get the equation by itself, or to solve for that specific sector. I don't like doing that or using that often, because if I need to find, some questions will ask you to find maybe just the radius, or they'll ask you to find the area of the sector, or they could just ask you to find what's the measurement of the arc, and they give you 2 out of the 3 missing pieces. You're going to have to automatically solve for that missing piece anyways, and it's better just to use the proportion, the first one, um, rather than the second one that's shown there, depending on what you need to solve for. So now let's go ahead and take a look at number 1. All right, so it says find the indicated measure, and it says let's find the area of circle M. And let's start off once again with our equation for area, and that's pi r squared. And we take a look right here, and the diagram is very specific. They show you a line that's going through point M, and it's going from one side of the circle to the next. That should tell us that that line is the diameter. And so if that's the diameter and I need the radius, well, I can't use 2 pi r or pi times d because that's finding the circumference. So right here, what I need to do is, since the diameter is 5, hopefully we realize that if I take that and divide it by 2, my radius is 2.5 or 2.5. And so that's the number that we need to use right here in order to solve this out. A little tricky there, right? So we have ourselves area is equal to pi, and then we'll plug in 2.5, and then we'll square that. And if we have an exact answer, 2.5 squared ends up being 6.25, and then we'll have that as 6.25 pi. Don't forget, we are dealing with area, and so this is centimeters squared. If they ask you to simplify it out all the way, then you take 6.25, multiply it by pi, and that gets you 19.63 centimeters squared. And don't forget, in this section, they are asking you to round to the nearest hundredth. All right? So that's how you find the area. If they give you the diameter, then you need to figure out the radius. If they give you the radius, then you're set. You just go ahead and plug that in and solve the problem right out. Let's go ahead and take a look next up at number let's take a look at number 3. So it says let's find the area of the circle with a diameter of 1.8 inches. Okay. So this number 3 is very similar to what we just looked at on problem number 1, is that they started off with the diameter, and so make sure you read the question carefully. They do try to trick you sometimes, and so if they gave us a diameter, remember I need to know what the radius is. So we need to take this number, 1.8, we'll divide it by 2, and the radius is 0.9. So we have our equation, area is equal to pi r squared. Now we have our radius, we got pi times 0.9 squared. All right, if I have the exact answer, which we do not need, and let's go ahead, take 0.9, we'll square that, and then you're going to be left with right here, and then multiply it by pi, you got 2.59, and then we'll have ourselves our unit of measure, which is inches squared. And that right there is your solution. All right. Let's take a look at number 4 next. So it looks like they want you to find the diameter of a circle with the area of 10 square feet. Okay, so this time right here, that right there is A for our area. They're saying, well, we got to find the diameter of a circle. Well, there is no direct way of finding the diameter of a circle given the area. You have to find the radius first. Because in our equation for area of a circle, area is equal to pi r squared. So what I could do is go ahead and substitute in right here 10 for my area. and then figure out what r is. You want to go ahead next, divide both sides by pi, and we're left with r squared is equal to 10 over pi. I don't have r by itself, so let's go ahead right here. In order to get r by itself, we have to square root both sides. And so r is going to end up equaling rad 10 over pi. Now here's the tricky thing. You should be doing this part in your calculator. Okay, make sure you have parentheses, probably over 10, and the pi right there. So in your calculator, you've got, if we put it over here on the side, it'll probably look like this, the square root, and then you'll probably have to put in 10 and in parentheses divided by pi in order for it to work out. Okay, so once you do that, remember, this number that you end up with for your radius is an approximation. And I don't want you, it is approximately 1.784. However, I don't want you just using this rounded number right here, okay? Because we're trying to find the diameter, remember, we need to take whatever we get right here, and this is where you would use your calculator, and then take this and then multiply it by 2. Because if we double the radius, then that gets us our diameter. And your final answer right here will end up being 1.784, or sorry, it's not going to be the same thing. It's going to be approximately 3.57 feet. And this right here is your diameter. All right, so it's always important to make sure that you look at what's being solved for. Try to think, that's why you need to know and remember those equations so you know, all right, this one right here, area is equal to pi r squared. But I find the radius, but you have to figure out after that, multiply your answer by 2 to get your diameter. All right, let's go ahead and move on. Let's take a look and drop down to number 7. Right here, we're now dealing with area of our sector. And the area of the sector formed by angle PQR. If I look right here, here's my sector that's highlighted, and I want to find that area. So what I'm going to go ahead and do, remember, we have the area. Let's start off with the equation. It's the area of the sector over pi r squared, since we're talking about area. And that's equal to the measurement of the arc divided by how many degrees we have in a circle, which is 360. Because remember, this is dealing with degrees. So when we think about our circle, we have 360 degrees makes up a circle. So let's see what we could figure out right here. Remember, we have our central angle is 140. So what that tells me is the measurement of this arc right here is 140 degrees. So we can go ahead and plug that in over here. They also give you the radius, which is 4 centimeters. Key, right? So what is unknown is now the area of the sector. We can go ahead and plug things in to find the area. Is going to be pi times 4 squared, and that's equal to 140. The measure of the arc, divide that by 360. All right, so now we have all our pieces. We cross multiply, we simplify, you solve for the area of the sector. So we multiply this way, we end up with 360x. And then use your calculator, you got 140 times 16. And I would try to, once again, not deal and mess with pi until the very end of your um, calculations here so that you don't have to be rounding and dealing with long numbers. So right here, 140 times 16, that ends up getting you to 22,240 pi. And then we'll get x by itself. We divide both sides by 360, and x is now equal to, you have approximately 19.55 centimeters squared. Okay? And that right there is the area of the sector formed by angle PQR. There are problems later on that you may find. They'll ask you to find the other area, the non-shaded section. And hopefully what you could do simply is um, you'd have to just change one thing right here in the problem, and you would change the measurement of the arc, and then you'd plug in uh, what is it? If you take 360 minus 140, you'd end up with 220, and you could find the measure or the area of that sector instead. Okay? That's just one way. Maybe you could figure out another. On number 8, we have right here, let's find the area of circle Y. Okay, so let's see what they have right here. They gave us the area of a sector this time around. All right, so let's see. If we take a look at our equation once again, remember it's area of a sector and it's divided by pi r squared, and that's equal to the measurement of the arc over 360. So let's see if you could figure out and plug a few things in. I look right here and they tell me 4.1 is square feet is the area. So that should go in for area of the sector. So I'll go ahead right here. Let's plug in 4.1 up at the top. We'll put that over pi r squared. Okay, we don't know what the radius is this time around. All right, so let's see what else we could do here. The measurement of the arc happens to be x to z, and the central angle is 25 degrees, so that's the measure of the arc. So let's go ahead and plug in 25 right here. And then finally, that number is not going to change, and it's going to be 360. Okay. So what we could now do is go ahead and start cross multiplying. And then let's see if we can figure out what r is. Once we find what r is, then we could figure out the area of our circle. Okay, so we got ourselves 360 times 4.1. We have 1,476. And that right there is going to be equal to 25 pi r squared. All right. So then we go ahead. We got to figure out what r is. In order for us to do that, we can go ahead and divide both sides by 25 pi. That cancels the 25 pi out, and we now have r squared is equal to all of this right here. Okay, so now let's go ahead and figure out what r is, and you can go ahead and square root both sides. And so I'll give you a few moments to do that. You may have to put that for 1,476, divide that by 25 pi, put some things in parentheses in order for it to work out correctly. Because if you don't, your calculator will go ahead and just take 1,476, it'll divide it by 25, and then multiply it by pi afterwards. So that's why it is important right there for you to make sure you put all that stuff in parentheses. Okay. And after you do that and you square root both sides, you will get r is approximately 4.3. Now, the longer the number, the better right here. Because once again, if you keep it too short, then you're going to be rounding off your number. So I'm saying our radius is approximately 4.33509. Now that we have the radius, then we can now find the circle or the area of circle Y. Okay, so one last step now, find the area of circle Y, and we have ourselves area is equal to pi, and then we have our radius. If you plug in 4.33509 pi r squared, or if you have that number in your calculator, you can go ahead and quite simply just put use the second and the answer key, where it'll take that previous number. You take pi times answer squared, and it should work out. So the area of this circle right here ends up being approximately 59.04, and we are dealing with feet. So it's 59.04 feet squared. So you can see right there how we do that. It's a two-part problem. I used the original equation that's given up here. Okay, that's why I don't like to use that second one where it was the measure of the arc over 360 times pi r squared. That's good if I'm trying to find the area of the sector, but see, I'm not this time around. So if I just go ahead and set it up like so, I'll still be able to come up and cross multiply and figure out how to come up with my radius first of the circle or of the sector to help me find the area of the circle. Lastly, let's take a look at number 9. They are asking us right here. They're saying that about 70,000 people live in a region with a 30-mile radius, and it says find the population density per square mile. So they're asking you once again, the very first thing we talked about was population density, which is like the amount of people that lives in a given area. It's very simple to solve these types of problems out. I'll go ahead and give you the ratio that we use right here, and it's the number of people divided by the area of the land. Okay, so if you use this right here, we have the amount of people happens to be 70,000. So we'll go ahead and plug that up right here. The area of the land we need to figure out because they give us 30-mile radius. They tell us that. So the area of the land will go ahead and be pi my radius of 30 and square it. So that right there will be the area of the land. So to find the population density, we'll go ahead, or you can go ahead and divide the two numbers, and you'll get approximately 24.75. Now, I believe they say it's about 70,000 people, and they're going to ask you, well, how many people per square mile? We can go ahead right here, take this number, we'll round it up, and we can go ahead and say that we have approximately 25 people per square mile. And that would be the answer that they would expect in big ideas. All right, that concludes lesson 11.2.